Mayor Roderick, you talked about Bob Atwood and the Times. How important were they to getting the word out in Anchorage? And wasn't Atwood pretty listened to in the business community, and he helped to turn the tide as far as how people in the urban areas thought about ANCSA and the land claims?
Well,
or not?
No, he spoke for the business community, no question about it. I think I once accused him of not being in favor of land claim settlement. And he said, oh, no, I was for it. Can we go back to 66, Mike Gravel's mention about AFN?
Sure.
Then he runs for office in 68 and it isn't an issue. I mean, a movie should be made of this. There were a group of young natives, mostly young, and they were just playing it by ear, right? Mm-hmm. Just gut reaction. Most of them are still alive. Make one heck of a movie. But Mike's mentioned too of William Paul. A lot of history in Southeast by William Paul and his son and three lawyers. But William Paul was a key guy. He educated Charlie Anderson. You know, don't give up. And I think Don Wright was a student of his. You know, it's our land. It's all our land. And then it transferred into, Scoop Jackson, of course. I knew Scoop Jackson, and Mike's right. But he didn't want to give any land, did he? He got to 10 million and then he stopped.
You're quite right. In fact, it started out with 100,000 acres, 1 million acres, 2 million acres, and it never really got off the ground. And I was telling Nellie earlier that I was in Ketchikan, and I don't recall the details of it, but I was asked about it, and I said, they want 40 million acres, and to me that sounds like justice. Well, by that time, I was way out. And I want to talk a little, I'll come back a moment about, when the urban community became aware of it. And so I thought I was really in difficulty. Lo and behold, a short time after, Wally Hickel came out for 40 million acres. So once that got locked in, a Democrat 40 million acres, Republican 40 million acres, and that was it. That was the number. Now, I might say that up at the Point Barrow, they were talking about now they got 40 on the table. Oh, we want 60.
The numbers did change a lot.
But once it was agreed upon within the political community that 40 was acceptable. Now, keep in mind, that was not acceptable to Atwood and others. Let me reinforce what happened that John was talking about. The urban areas became aware of the land claims when they were hurting, and they were angry because what was holding up the development of Alaska was the freeze by Udall, which was a very extremely tactical, strategic event.
The land freeze.
When I got first elected, I went back even before I was sworn in. I went to see Udall, and he's sitting in his office, and all he wanted to talk about was the land freeze. Well, I had heard about it, but I wasn't educated about it, even though I just got elected. And you're quite right. This was not an issue in the 68 election because the coalescing within the community was just taking place from 66, 67, 68. It was just forming. But as far as in the streets of Anchorage and the other communities, we are going bankrupt. Our businesses are dying on the vine because we got this damn freeze that's locked up everything and we can't do anything. And what's causing that?
Let's tell people what the freeze was.
Oh, under the Statehood Act, we had the ability to select 104 million acres. And so the state there's taken its time rocking around, cherry-picking the land. Well, as it was coming out, we're taking this, we're taking that, people in the native community were saying, my God, that's my land, that's very valuable land, I resent their taking it. And so that was part of the motivation to coalesce. And so Lyndon Johnson gave Udall the green light, and it was, from all I can tell, it was Udall's idea. And so he said, I'm going to wake these people up. I'm going to put a freeze on Alaska that they're going to learn about the native land claims and the responsibility they have to the rural community of Alaska. He put it on, and you couldn't do anything. There was no more selection by the state, and as far as the oil companies, it brought into question their title. Even up on the North Slope where they were really getting into drilling, when you were asked about, there was talk in Washington and in Houston and in Dallas, my God, our titles may not be valuable. We're spending hundreds of millions of dollars. This is crazy. And talk about coalescing. It was Ed Patton, and he talks about Ed Patton coming to Anchorage. Now keep in mind, up at this point in time, within the urban areas, the land claims was a terrible thing, and the problem was these damn natives were just hurting us. And people were going bankrupt in Anchorage and other parts, and in Fairbanks, because they anticipated what was going to go on. But then Patton, with one speech, turned it all the way around, turned Atwood around, turned the Chamber of Commerce around. When he came in and said to the Chamber of Commerce, look it, there's no way we will continue to exploit the oil resources of Alaska, and you can kiss the pipeline goodbye, and all that, and said that we have got to settle the native land claims. And now, he made that speech in Alaska, and that turned around Atwood and turned around the community into a form of neutrality, and in some cases, intelligent support. He was making the same argument to his bosses, which were all these oil companies in going back to Houston and to London and other areas. And of course, in your book, Jack, about Hugh Gallagher back there when you didn't tell the story before, but the head of BP was talking about what the hell's all these land claims all about. You know, there's an unbelievable arrogance within the oil industry. You know, they were Texans, and they were going to come up here and show us how to do it. Well, thank God they had the environmental community that made them study it to the tune of $300 million before they got it done, because had they done it the way they wanted to do it, it would have been one of the most ecological disasters in the history of the nation, or possibly the world. But the head, Sir Eric Drake was his name. I met him later because I was negotiating to get the AgSoc to buy a piece of the pipeline. But Sir Eric, very British, you know, Sir Knighted, head of BP, and he's telling Hugh Gallagher, who's sitting there, he says, well, he's telling him about the claims, and Hugh says, well, you know, this is in court. And Sir Drake says, can't you talk to the judge? And Hugh says Hugh looks at him straight in the eyeballs and says, is that the way you do business here in Britain? And of course it is. It is. I give you an example of it. So that was that story, and of course what changed was the event of, there are a lot of little wedges that took place as this developed. Somebody up there liked the natives, there's no question about it, because it happened at a point in history with this new political awareness, with the difficulty with oil. Ernest Green once confided to me when I was a protege, he said, Mike, you know, we should have never became a state. It made no sense at all economically. And it didn't. We got our first major economic boost because up until the earthquake, we were in the doldrums. And the earthquake and the money that Lyndon Johnson showered on Alaska brought about a level of prosperity. And then after that came the Cook Inlet oil discovery. And that's how we got statehood. Make no mistake about it. We'd have never got statehood if it hadn't for Bob Kerr and other senators, oil senators from Texas, Lyndon Johnson, all of that. When you had the oil interest developed in the Cook Inlet, that's what brought about statehood. And then statehood brought about the land claims, or intertwined in that was the freeze. After the land claims came the pipeline legislation. After that came ANILCA, and the rest is history. Because we're living with many of the problems that were not adjudicated and that were not dealt with in an equitable fashion. Because, and you live with these problems today, both in the Native community and the urban community.
We did a series many years ago on ASA, and we had an opportunity to interview Stuart Udall back in his home state. And it was really interesting. He was so animated about it. He said it was like, he remembered it like it was yesterday. He said his staff, he said, and they came running in one day and said, look at this, we've got to do something about this. So we just did it. And it was, he was like, we just did it.
And he did. This changed the whole climate in the Congress. And he had the backing of Lyndon Johnson. He lost it later when he happened to name the stadium for Bobby Kennedy. But at that point, he was riding high, and I'll never forget it. I went to his office. He's sitting in a rocking chair with a sweater on, and a fire in the fireplace. He was enjoying the perks of power, and all he could talk about was the freeze. Boy, we really did it, and you Alaskans have got to wake up and solve this problem, or you're not going to move ahead economically.